asked me if they could. I ran it past Mr. Mara, he objected. And I thought, well,
Okay,
again, as I've said many times in that hearing, we're not in the courtroom. You know, they were the applicant, he was the applicant, but it became too cumbersome pretty
Okay.
quickly, so we just stopped it.
okay, so future special meetings with that, then that'll no longer be allowed, correct?
I would if it worked,
I'm sorry,
but I said, I would go ahead and recommend to the board that they allow it if it worked, but it wasn't working, and I mean, he was asking questions about documents
okay.
that the lady, you know, hadn't seen and wasn't even in front of
No,
her, so.
my position is, or my request would be, if it's allowed to continue, that the number be made available to everyone, so everyone can call in
Yeah,
who's
and
not here.
it's not gonna work, so
Okay.
I don't think we'll do that or try it anymore.
Oh, okay, thank you. Next, and this is my words, apparently this township has somewhat recently, at least this year, implemented a new security system to many entry doors. And in my words, I would call it the slang term a swipe card entry system. I don't know what the correct term is, but apparently some new doors were installed on the front to allow that system in. There is no, in the former doors, you had the names of the 3 trustees, the address, office phone number, I believe the office hours. I was wondering if and when there was any intention of returning that lettering to the front doors of this building, and possibly, I recall they also had it at the North End Community Room up by the North End Fire Station.
So the north is still there, it hasn't changed. The glass in that door is defective and has to be replaced. When the company does that, then Mr. Kellums will go forward with that. But the glass that's in there will be replaced.
Okay, almost done here. On the agenda for, at the Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018 trustee workshop in the morning, there was a resolution, one, possibly two, authorizing agreements or contracts with 2 different firms for what I believe the trustees and administration have dubbed the Kenwood Road Medium Landscaping Project. Off the top of my head, as I recall, combining the 2, that's well in excess of $40,000. As I recall, this would be for the medium and Kenwood Road in Sycamore Township, roughly between Interstate 71, Montgomery Road, possibly coming up to East Galbraith Road. As I mentioned, I believe at a recent public meeting here, that is a county road. Kenwood Road in Sycamore Township is a county road. It's maintained by the county engineer. I see you have it on the agenda to vote upon tonight, 2 different contracts. And again, as a citizen, I believe we should not be paying any money for county roads. And I would urge you to vote no on each of those resolutions for tonight. And going back to the public hearings for the capital project, is it the intention, if and when they get completed, whether they have 1 more, 2 more, several more, at the conclusion of one of those, will this board be voting upon that issue, whether to approve it or deny it?
Oh, yeah. Whenever that is,
Okay.
that's the process.
And my last item would be several residents of Sycamore Township, through public requests, have done some research on, my words, the summer festivals over the last several years in Sycamore Township. I believe for well in excess of a decade, every single one has taken thousands of dollars in losses. I believe there's gonna be a presentation later on tonight from some citizenry about that issue. And if that is indeed correct, I would urge the trustees to give serious thought to no longer having those events. Some of the losses, particularly in the last several years, are 6 figures. 6 figures. And although some may believe it's a nice social event, a nice summer event, nice musical event, I don't think we taxpayers can absorb 6-figure losses for multiple years. That concludes my time tonight. I thank you for your time.
Next, Tom James.
Something I wanted to discuss with the trustees, and I'll get to it in a moment, but I have a few other points to make first, so I'll not distract you with it right now, if it doesn't fall. Let me first thank the trustees for taking public comments at these meetings. I know there's good and bad from that, from the trustees' perspective probably, but I do sincerely appreciate you listening to me and the others who are here, so thank you very much for doing that. I had a few things I wanted to mention, but Mr. Janus mentioned something that.
Would you stick your name and
Yeah,
address for the record, please?
I apologize, yes. I'm Tom James. I live at 5784 Whitechapel Drive here in Sycamore Township. Mr. Janus asked about the names on the front door, and I've come in the back door of the building the last few times I've been here. I hadn't noticed they weren't on there, but I just thought I'd share as a personal note. Moving to Ohio from Georgia, one of the many things I noticed that's different here is, and I'm not suggesting you gentlemen are doing this to the extent others do, but there is a bit of self-aggrandizement of government officials. I lived in Gwinnett County, Georgia. There we have buildings that say Gwinnett County Courthouse, Gwinnett County Clerk of Courts is what the door says. When there's an election or a change in appointment, they don't have to change the name on the door. In Ohio, I was a little surprised to see that in Hamilton County, for example, for years we had Greg Hartman, Clerk of Courts. Huge picture on the website, followed by Tracy Winkler, Clerk of Courts, and now Ted Pureval, Clerk of Courts. All the logos get changed, all the shirts get changed for the uniforms the employees wear. Sycamore is rather sparse in doing that, fortunately, and I hope you gentlemen continue that. I know you're putting your names on the door, that's a minor lettering thing, but hey, as a citizen, I'd appreciate it if we don't see big signs out front with each of your faces in full color. You've all been very good about that. Please don't start that.
Hey, we'll do whatever the board wants. If you don't want your name, no problem.
Ohio governments seem to spend a lot of money on changing the names and faces on the signs, and that does get expensive, so thank you for not doing that here. A few things to mention here. First of all, last month at this meeting, I had a few suggestions to the Board of Trustees and to Mr. Bickford, and I was very pleased to see, looking on the township's website this week, that he apparently took some of that to heart, and I appreciate it. I had suggested putting draft minutes on the website, and they are there. There are proposed resolutions for what you gentlemen are considering tonight. They were posted in advance of this meeting the other day as well. So thank you all for making that happen. I appreciate that.
Just call me with suggestions. We're happy to listen. You don't have to wait till this meeting.
You know, a what's new list would be great still too. That may take a little engineering, but
As the person who prepares those resolutions, I would like to say sometimes they may not be there because sometimes the request comes in at the last minute.
You're not looking that way, are you? I don't see anything over there.
well,
So-
when possible, it's greatly
We're
appreciated.
trying to.
Thank you. I mean that sincerely, thank you. Ohio checkbook, something I mentioned last month. Again, I appreciate that being there and being a resource. It still hasn't been updated with data since April, and it shows the last update was June 13th. I don't know if that's a quarterly process, or if it's supposed to be monthly, or if there's a data transmission snag in there somewhere, but will there be regular updates at some point?
It's quarterly, and in fact, I think the latest set of data goes up, if not tomorrow, early next week.
Fantastic, thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention, and it's what Mr. Janus was discussing as well toward the end of his discussion, it's the festival in Sycamore. And I've spent a little time taking a look at some numbers that Debbie Campbell has been nice enough to share with me, and also with Mr. Fortin, which he shared with me then, going back from 2004 to 2018. I'd like to actually show some of those numbers to you. I think it might be helpful to see that in front of you, if I may. Mr. Bickford one as well. This first page is a summary. This first page is a summary of the numbers over the years, and then we have a chart here that I put together because pictures tell the story sometimes much better than numbers alone do. Hopefully the board can see this here. Microsoft Excel makes this very easy and very visual. According to the numbers Ms. Campbell provided, this most recent year, we cut our losses a bit. We lost 20,000 less approximately than the year before. We lost 135,000 instead of 156,000 the year before in the festival. But each year, the festival takes in revenues primarily from donations, and then about $6,000 to $10,000 from actual sales and booth rentals there. And then it has huge expenses. I've mentioned this before, and I think Mr. Weedman or Mr. Connor said it's because the bands have gotten a lot more expensive because of the casinos. But be that as it may, take a look at the numbers. The green bars you see there on the chart, those are the years we made money. There are no green bars, obviously. It's red every year, and it's getting worse and worse to the point where I just have numbers for the last 15 years. That's what Ms. Campbell had going back to 2004. The township, after taking in revenues and spending money, has flushed $1.1 million into this festival in losses. That's a lot of money. Now, we citizens are told the township is run like a business. A business run like that doesn't last long. These are Tesla-like numbers. Perhaps one day it's going to do well. Maybe the festival will do well. But we are hemorrhaging red ink on this festival. These are staggering numbers. We've never apparently made money on the festival. As I said, most of the revenues are actually from donations each year, and those vary wildly over time, as you can see from the summary as to what's coming in. Some of the numbers of the first few years here, I didn't have the particulars to break it down in the summary you see as to what came from rentals, sales, and donations. It wasn't easy to categorize that, but for the year starting in 2009, it was fairly easy to do that. Now, the township spends about $10,000 each year just advertising this festival on region-wide media. Who is this festival for? Is this to attract people from around the region, from up in Dayton and down in northern Kentucky and over in Indiana and maybe out to Portsmouth even, for whatever the reach of this is, to bring them in to try to make money from them, to reduce the deep red bars there? I don't think so. I think it's for the citizens of the township. If it's for marketing purposes, it doesn't seem to be achieving that goal. We're not Blue Ash. Blue Ash, of course, does major marketing with their Red, White, and Blue Ash Festival and others. I don't think they're losing money proportionately like this, to the extent we are, however. They were for years. I've spoken with Jeff Cavell there and others, and yes, they were hemorrhaging for a while too. They claim they've gotten a handle on that. I don't know their numbers, maybe they haven't. But we spend more on advertising this thing than we actually bring in revenues when you don't count the donations. We spend tens of thousands of dollars each year on bands, on lodging for bands, on the proper brand of tea for the bands when they're performing, for staging for the bands, for promoters for the bands. Is there any oversight of this festival budget? Is there a festival budget, in fact? I can't seem to find one from looking at budget figures. Perhaps it's there, but it seems to be interspersed with other budget items. Maybe some of it's coming out of the maintenance budget, maybe some of it's coming out of the parks budget. But does anyone take a look at this thing overall each year to decide, let's go in and only lose this much, or only lose a certain other amount, or maybe try to make money? Is there in fact a budgeting process? This is a rhetorical question right now. There may be answers to this, and I'd be interested to hear that. But hearing, for example, when I first brought this up in a meeting, that it's gotten more expensive over the years. This was going on before each of you was elected, and it's a tradition that's been going on. And the casinos have caused the cost to go up because they've increased the bidding price for the type of bands we like to have here. Well, you know, our citizens can go to the casinos to hear those bands if they like, or they can go to the Taft Theater if they're playing there, or to Riverbend. We don't have to hire bands like that. We could hire local bands, which I understand also perform there at the festival. As I've mentioned to the board before, the Catholic churches in the area have festivals similar to this with the goal of making money each year, and typically they do that. And we run this like a government operation instead, and we get government operation results instead of like a business results. So the taxpayers are investing a whole lot of money into a project that seems to financially benefit the vendors who come there and the contractors that the township hires to provide services and materials for the festival, but at great expense to the taxpayers without any return to the township, it appears. I understand from others who have told me they question parks people and others about the festival each year, how many residents come? What's the mix of residents and non-residents? And the answer is, oh, I don't know. I saw a lot of people I knew there. We don't know, in my understanding, whether it is township people even coming to this. We have it in Bechtold Park. It's a nice facility. I think a lot of Deer Park is coming to this, and we're paying for that. So, you know, I understand there are funds raised by the vendors as well from things like beer concessions and others that are donated to charities that have been donated in other places in the past. This is a pretty inefficient way to raise those funds to donate. Frankly, we'd be better off if the township just expropriated the money from the taxpayers and gave it directly to the charities rather than burning through the expenses that we see visually depicted here on the chart. So, in summary, there are far better uses for these funds that we're losing each year. I mean, $135,000 this year, $156,000 last year. There are people dying in the High Point community. They need better police protection and more police protection. That money could have paid for some of that. Could have paid for neighborhood watch funding or signage or video surveillance there. It could have paid for better audio-visual services in this room, perhaps to make video recordings so citizens don't need to come in and do that. It could be used for park upgrades, for some trees in some of our parks perhaps, or nicer signage or facilities in the parks, nicer things here in the township building perhaps. Or the taxpayers could just keep their money and not have it go into this. So you gentlemen have a lot of people reporting to you from the township, and they report through Mr. Bickford. What processes are in place to keep things like this from happening so we're not just flushing money down a hole? And that seems to be where it's going. I'd be interested in comments if anyone has any.
Great. What's the allocation we have on Parks and Rec for this event?
We put in about 100,000 and then we adjust it as necessary. The festival cost is what it is based on what you gentlemen decide to do for bands, and then we adjust from there. But we generally start out at $100,000 for the festival.
Does that include our internal costs like maintenance and that kind of thing, the maintenance guys?
It does partially, because some of it's an overtime cost, some of it's a standard day work type cost where that's their assignment for the day. So it includes some of that, but it's not, the expenses have gone up in the last couple of years have shown it's more expensive. So we're gonna have to, if you gentlemen decide to keep doing this at this type of level, obviously we're gonna have to look at that over the last 2 years. There's been some significant expenses.
Do you have any comparisons at all, or?
Yeah, when this came out, when I saw, probably right before you guys did, I saw the tally on the festival. I said, wow, we need to definitely take a look at this. So I wanted to see what our surrounding communities did for their various events. And I've got the information, I just wasn't prepared to present it for you, but I've got it in a rough format. If you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes, I think I can pull it off the server and put it up here and show it to you.
Okay.
So I can sort of do that, or if you guys want to keep going while I get that set. Wait, it could be a minute or two by the time I find it.
All right, well, if you got something else.
Well, I would just note from the numbers Mr. Bickford gave, if we started around 100,000 this year, the expenses were 162,000 total. The year before, it was almost 190,000 spent. That's way past $100,000.
So it looks like in the last 15 years, we've been over $100,000 twice in costs, correct?
No, more than that. It looks like starting in 2010, you were at 119. I don't have my glasses on.
I'm talking about the
At loss?
the loss we've had, which is really what our cost is.
Right, the losses had been over 100,000 the last 2 years and nearly 100,000 the 3 years before that, at 94, 97, and 94,000 again.
Which are within, let me rephrase that. So we've only been, two years, we've only been over the $100,000 threshold in which we allocated for this event, correct?
Okay.
It would have been last year and this year.
I understood Mr. Bickford to mean that the township planned to spend $100,000 before bringing it back in revenues. I misunderstood then. But yes, the losses have only been as deep as 100,000 or more for about the last 5 years.
This is down.
Now, I should add as well, though, that these numbers are from the township, and looking through the yearly numbers, which I did attach to these packets I gave the trustees, these numbers aren't always accurate in that they understate the loss in certain years. For example, one year there's listed as revenue $3,600 or so in value of hotel rooms donated by the DoubleTree Suites. That's counted as revenue, then there's no offsetting expense as well. It wasn't cash the township took in. It was a donation in kind. If you show it on one side of the balance sheet, it needs to be on the other.
Sure, I'm not familiar with that, but I
So-
trust that that's the case.
Examples like that. Some years there are significant township employee expenses that were billed to the festival. Other years, there were none. There are sheriff's expenses, which vary quite a bit over the years as well. I would think the presence there is probably consistent each year. So the numbers aren't exactly
I
right.
think
but
on the
they're close.
sheriff's, do we get some of the volunteers to work there, is that right?
This was off to the detail rate. This was the first time I've been involved in scheduling any of that, gathering the personnel for it. And I believe, and I don't want to speak for Mike, but part of the increase in law enforcement presence was directly related to the bands.
Yeah, there was,
this
normally
year-
they get explorers. This year was just an odd year with the requirements
But
of.
the sheriff's deputies
Particular band.
who worked that were not, they were not paid overtime. They were paid our standard off-duty detail rate, so.
So this is something, based when I saw that, I wanted to provide you guys some information. Wasn't intending to present this right now, it's just kind of notes I was taking as I went forward. I contacted Montgomery and Blue Ash, our two closest neighbors. I contacted some other communities in too, but the problem is they don't have events like this anymore. Miami Township used to spend $400,000, Claremont County. They cut that event when they were no longer able to afford it. And their thoughts were, we're going out for levies for our various apartments and whatnot, and this is an expense we don't have. Obviously, you have not done that. This is, obviously, we have the income coming in to match us through the JEDs and whatnot.